Alrighty. Hey, gang. Welcome back, you guys. Hey, Robin. Nice to see you. Hold on, you guys. I got to update the chat here, the chat window. Let's see if that does it. There we go. All right. Hey, gang. How are ya? Happy Wednesday. Welcome back. Another episode of Stove Chat. Hey, Robin and Belgian Gulch. Nice to see ya. Tall Shadow. All right. We got the whole crew here. Good to see you, boys and ladies and everybody. Carpenter family. Hello, hello, hello. All right, you guys. Awesome. Happy Wednesday. 49 and raining. Yeah, Belgian Gulch. I was actually just thinking about how I wish it would warm up. It's cold here. It's not cold, but it's not warm. It's just not quite 60 here, so not as cold as you. And I'm ready for summer, but it just won't happen. We just been gloomed out for the last few weeks, but no worries. Still pretty stoked. Having a great beginning of summer here. David Swanson, hello. Happy Wednesday. Leon, nice to see you guys. Well, how is everybody? You guys having a great week? I know that I've heard from some of you guys via email. Thank you so much for all your emails and comments and photos. Lovely to get all that and hear all your input. Thank you guys. Really appreciate all the support. In all seriousness, it means a lot to me. So really stoked. I'll do my best to cover everything. There's a lot to go through today. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of it. But I'll try and cover all of what you guys have sent to me. There's quite a few exciting things going on out there. So yeah, Tall Shadow about 55 and drizzling there. So it's just cool everywhere. Interesting. Yeah, definitely love it here, and I'm much happier this way than being hot. So I'm not complaining about our June gloom, but I am ready for some summer. I'm ready to do some summer stuff. But yeah, so hope you guys had a good week. Let's see, rocket stove stuff this week. What have you guys been doing? I actually kind of wrapped up the majority of my firewood stuff earlier this week. I'm going to keep picking away at it, of course, and then fall and make a big push for next year. But I'm pretty well. I mean, I've been set for this coming season, but I did another big push and got I got one big tree all bucked and split and stacked and up. Feels great. I've been talking to a whole lot of you guys about stoves and stove stuff. It seems like fall's just around the corner, so everyone's kind of getting excited and getting prepared, and that's been really cool. Lot of neat builds coming out right now. I'm getting some interesting emails from folks, and so can't wait to share some of that stuff with you. Positive Aspect, you made it. Nice to see ya. So let's see, what should we start with, you guys? Does anyone have any simple chat questions they want to throw at me first before I get distracted with the preloaded photos and questions and stuff? Because I got a feeling that we might get stuck in the email stream for the rest of the chat here if we go that direction. So I'll give you guys a minute or two to anyone who's in the chat who hasn't emailed me, or if you have any other questions, please send them along, and let's cover them. Because we got a lot of stuff to go through today. So yeah, Positive Aspect, a sleepy hello. I'm not sure what time it is there, but I know you always say it's like 3 a.m. or something, so I apologize. If I could, I would be there with you. I think you live in a pretty wonderful spot. But I wish my timing was more like that. And I'm going to try to bring up some photos today, so we'll see how that goes. So, hey, Pete. How you doing, man? Good to see ya. Can't wait to hear more about your pizza oven. I don't think we ever shared photos of that here. You shared your photos with me of your pizza oven, and I know it wasn't quite ready for prime time. But I'm looking forward to showing that off to people. I think you've got a cool thing going there. So hope you're doing well, Pete. Hope you're moving forward on that oven. It's summertime. I guess you've probably been maybe even doing some outdoor cooking. So let's see. I have some. We definitely got some stuff to go over. Some photos. 4 a.m. says positive aspect. I thought I remembered that. Yeah, getting there. I knew you'd still be picking away at it, Pete. It doesn't go quickly, so you take your time. So hey, Hugh. Good to see ya. Welcome. So let's try. Let's just start with trying to bring up a photo. My stream status says good. And so it looks like we're working good, so we'll go. Oh, here's a question from Leon. Leon asks, would this work? Ceramic fiber blanket burner core with normal tile lining or ceramic round pipe stuff. I'm guessing no one has done it because it will eventually crack. Yes, Leon. Actually, people have done... definitely have tried tiles inside fireboxes, and actually I think people have tried those like ceramic chimney liners that you're talking about. They were actually, I can't remember what the name of that material is, but they're basically like fire brick type material. You can get them pretty, they seem like they're pretty sturdy. None of it's going to hold up inside a rocket stove simply because the temperature swings are too great, and so the tiles just, you know, one side's hot and one side's cold, and they just shatter pretty much almost, you know, not, they don't shatter dangerously or instantly, but, you know, they just don't hold up for sure, especially with the insulation, you know, right outside of them. So then they're captured within that insulated environment. It just drives their heat way too high, and it keeps a cool side and a hot side, and that tends to blow masonry apart. So, but with that said, I think we talked about it last week. There was a fella on my old forum that was making stoves that were simply, I mean, they were pretty much just ceramic fiber blanket for the cores. And he used like chicken wire. It was stiffer than chicken wire, contractor's mesh, to give it some shape. And then he would kind of form the shape of the core externally, you know, make a cage for it basically. And then he would line that with that ceramic blanket, and it worked amazingly well. And to be honest with you, in terms of wood in there, you know, if you're doing it yourself and you're just setting the wood in there, it's really not that bad to just have it be the wool, have just a fuzzy blanket for a firebox. I mean, yeah, you tear at it, but if it's big enough and you're loading carefully, it's not that bad for an experiment for sure. And then if you are looking for like a durable firebox inside of there, as you guys know, I have my RA330 liner, which is one way of doing that. You can also use fire brick splits, and they will eventually crack, but they'll give you probably a season's worth of service. And even cracked, they're still going to serve their purpose to protect the wool. So Dragon heaters use chimney liners for their bells, but you have to be careful to prevent cracking. That's right. I remember she used those big square ones for their bells, which is a pretty interesting idea. But yeah, you're just, it's, to me, you know, building with brick is so easy and inexpensive and flexible. I never saw I understood her reasoning. It wasn't because she thought it was the best way to build one. It was because she was trying to provide like a prefabbed solution to customers who didn't feel comfortable building stuff. So I understand why she went there, but I think that, you know, anyone who's building their own would be far better served to just stack up some bricks or whatever. It's the contiguous nature of those things. Whether it's even a small tile or a large liner, you're just never going to heat them evenly, steadily. So they're just going to have a hot side and a cold side, or whether it's a tile, you know, and they just can't take it. So, yeah. So Leon, yeah. So that is the deal, is you can use blanket very flexibly throughout builds, and actually we're going to go into that today in Belgian Gulch's email. So, or actually it's sort of a combo between Tall Shadow and Belgian Gulch, sending some great information about a recent build they've done, or Belgian Gulch has done, using the blanket to solve some fitting problems and stuff like that. So very cool stuff you can do with that. So I guess with that said, let's dive right in and let's see if I can get some photos to work. I'm going to change over, and you're going to lose me here, and we're going to hopefully see a picture of a rocket stove. Haha, there we go. one of you on here recognizes this this cool thing. So I didn't know which one was going to come up first. I don't have very good control over this. I had to load them all into a folder, and I didn't really have time to organize them. Okay, well, there we go. That's the one I was hoping to get first. And so they're going to be unorganized, but I'll try and talk about them, and then we'll reference. I got to go back and forth with your emails and whatnot. Anyways, this one I just love. So this is our regular chat contributor Augustus Smoothly's most recent build. And by the way, you guys, I'm just going to use your YouTube usernames when I talk about you. If you want to share who you are on another forum or whatever, feel free to do that. I know you by your usernames here and by your email names, so your real names, and sometimes it's different on other forums. So I'm not going to share, who you might be on other places, but feel free to if you'd like to say I'm so and so over there if you didn't know or whatever. Just so you know. So Obadiah Oracle says, "Hi Matt, is there a difference in the combustion efficiency of a high density refractory lined, like aluminum oxide tiles, firebox furnace versus a low density refractory lining like ceramic fiber?" That's a really great question, Obadiah. And I think from my presentations over the years, my videos, and all of my my journey my answer is yes. Is that there is a difference in combustion efficiency, and that they both have their pros and cons, and it's really up to the end user to decide what they're going to prioritize and which what their goals are. And so as soon as you put any mass in the firebox, you are instantly going to let's say increase startup times, because your temperature in your combustion core will not heat up as quickly. So to go from lighting the fire to a smokeless, clean burn is going to take longer if you have mass in the firebox, because you'll have to heat up that firebox mass as well. You'll be giving some heat to that rather than getting that heat focused back on combustion. The advantage, though, is that you don't have an abrading, surface within the firebox. So you might have more durability. Now, that isn't always the case. Fire brick splits and anything in a firebox, as I talked about earlier, they don't really hold up to heat cycling very well, so they tend to crack. And it doesn't really take all that much time. So even though a firebox, when you build it, seems like it's going to last forever, you'll get through a season or two and you'll find that you might, you have some loose little pieces of bricks that have cracked. Probably not going to wreck the stove, but for a lot of people think it just means they're not going to crack, and that isn't the case. They'll crack, and sometimes you have to replace them. I don't think it's a big deal either way. So in terms of efficiency, which is what your question was, Obadiah, the answer is yes. The lowest mass firebox is going to come up to temperature the quickest, so it's going to burn the most efficient. It's going to start burning efficient sooner than the high mass firebox, and it's also going to burn more completely, especially as you get to the end of a burn. Now, there's an old wives' tale that people who have been building high mass fireboxes always say, "Oh, but you give it back at the end to make the stuff burn more complete longer at the end of the burn." And I'm calling straight BS on that. When have you ever felt a rock, giving off, with no heat input into it, giving off more heat than it's getting? It doesn't work that way. If the combustion isn't driving the combustion, any mass isn't going to drive that combustion for any more than a blink of an eye. So the insulation definitely helps you burn completely all the way through to the end of the burn, as well as starting up quick, so you do have a more efficient burn. Now, whether that's a huge deal or not, I don't believe it really is. It totally depends on how you burn, what you're burning. There's a lot of different variables. When you're just burning a single load, that high mass firebox isn't really that big of a detriment. It does take a little longer to come up to temp, but once it's burning, most of that's happening in the afterburner. The biggest drawback to a high mass firebox, in my opinion, is that it changes the ratio of how things burn through the course of a burn. In other words, by holding all that heat in the firebox, if you load second or third loads into it, all of a sudden you have a real different situation with the fuel than you did from the first load, because now those hot bricks are flashing off all of your wood. So you have a way higher fuel to air ratio than you did in the first burn. So the stove needs different settings. And that's strictly because of that high mass firebox, that those characteristics change during the course of a day of burning. So in the case of someone like Peter Vandenberg, who builds a stove that is designed specifically to be burnt with a single load of wood and then let go out, and hopefully that's going to heat his house for 24 hours, a high mass firebox is a great way to go. Someone like me who's loading consecutive loads during a day because I live in an uninsulated shack, a high mass firebox is I find is detrimental. Because every time I load wood, I flash off all the fuel, I blow a bunch of smoke out my chimney, and then my fire burns out in about half the time it would have otherwise. So those are my feelings. Now again, that wasn't, hopefully I didn't pitch that as like better or worse. Those are just compromises, pros and cons that you have to choose depending on your goals. So so that's how that works. So Positive Aspect says, I'm planning to line the riserless core with 1/2-inch kiln shelf stone in the areas where the wood is loaded. Should I be worried? No, I don't think so, Positive Aspect. I think it will crack. I don't think you should expect it to stay completely in one piece. But I don't think it's going to be, it won't be a failure. It will certainly protect the ceramic fiberboard. And I think it'll work fine. Like I said, I think they're going to crack. Especially, so it's tempting to use kiln shelf, right? Because they're long. So you'll put it in the firebox, the whole length of the firebox on the side and the bottom. And unfortunately, the thing that makes that tempting is exactly what makes it break. Because it's long, it has bigger temperature differences at both sides. Across that distance is what I'm trying to say. And so it's much more likely to break as a kiln shelf than if it were to be put in there already broken up into fire brick splits. So, that's kind of the idea, is that once you're down to small pieces, they're probably not going to break anymore. Big pieces are always going to break. So hope that helps, Positive Aspect. So Augustus, hello. Nice to see you. Always learning. Hi. And always learning. I don't know if you finished that statement. Could you place the Heims? That's a great, I don't know what that means, but I assume you're talking about the high mass and the core, but I'll let you finish. So I'm going to jump back to this photo because Augustus, you just showed up and this was for us to talk about. So I was just talking about this wonderful build by Augustus that he sent me a photo of this week, and I just love this, Augustus. I think it is so cool. So it's a basic version of my aluminum series stove, and he's done a really cool thing and just simplified the build and made it far less expensive as well, with no detriment, in my opinion, to performance at all. And he's just added a 5-minute riser to it, instead of building a square riser box, which I think this is a much better solution, to be honest. It's very quick and easy and inexpensive and offers great performance. So super cool. Really stoked to see that, Augustus. I love it. I think it looks great. So it does get a little strange right there where that ceramic fiberboard kind of sticks out and makes the front where there's no bricks. So what I did on mine there was I actually put a little strap of aluminum and brought that aluminum top piece out over that a little more, and then I riveted a piece of angle iron over that and made a P-channel. And it also protected the front of those ceramic fiber boards. So a couple ways you can do that. But I love that, Augustus, and thank you so much for sending that along. And Augustus also has a great question, so I'll go back to the chat here, and then we'll catch up with the email questions. So Obadiah says, what, in your opinion, has the biggest impact on combustion efficiency besides enough oxygen, turbulence, or residence time at high temp? Well, Obadiah, as you know, I can tell from your question, the three T's are really the important part, which is time, temperature, turbulence, right? So you need all three of them, and it's a dynamic relationship. So if you have more temperature, you can have less time and less turbulence, and you can achieve perfect combustion. If you have more turbulence, you can have less time. And so you understand what I'm saying. So I don't think there's one that has the biggest impact. We talked about enough oxygen is what you're saying, is turbulence, residence time at high temp, which one? Again, I don't think you can really pick. I think it's going to be a function of sort of what you're trying to achieve and what you're working with. I mean, if you're working with heavy high mass bricks, you're probably not going to get high temps in a short time. So you're going to want longer combustion chambers so you can have a longer dwell time in the high temperature zone, and so on. We could chase that tail around in circles forever. It's basically, I think the most important thing to understand is I don't believe any one is more important than the other. It's a dynamic relationship between the three, and they're going to adjust in proportion. As one grows, the others will shrink. So I need to go back up and catch up with Always Learning. Always Learning was talking about the mass and says, could you place the high mass after the fuel has completely burned to retain heat? Always Learning, yes, that's exactly what we're doing with our rocket mass heaters. That's the whole concept in a nutshell. A rocket mass heater is a stove designed to burn at peak efficiency with an insulated combustion core and then deliver that heated gas to a high mass area to store the heat after it's been completely combusted. So this is why I always say mass in a firebox in a rocket mass heater is counterproductive. We want the mass post-combustion. We want peak combustion efficiency and peak harvesting efficiency, and those two things don't happen in the same location. And that's as simple as that. Great, really good question, Always Learning. Great way to boil it down. I can tell, just grabbing it. I love that. So Robin L says, would it be helpful to use half-length splits so the heat is more consistent over the smaller surface, fewer cracks already in small pieces? Yeah, Robin, sure, it would. Absolutely. The problem is when they get smaller, it gets harder and harder to hold them in place, right? When they're big enough, you can kind of intertwine them and lock them together. As soon as they're small, you start to have, well, how am I going to stick them to stuff? And so it becomes an issue. This is a path. I love all these questions because you guys, we're all going down this path together that I've already been down, and I come back around full circle and go, screw it, I'm just going to put ceramic fiberboard in there and let it wear down and put some more in there. Because I think it all is the same thing at the end of the day. The fire bricks at the end of the day are going to crack. They're going to turn themselves into smaller pieces. I mean, this is where I'm coming from, is like you could start with the kiln shelf, and after a few burns you'll have fire bricks, and after a few more burns you'll have a bunch of tiny pieces that have really nice joints, so they're all kind of held together because they fit together like a puzzle. So the thing is, I don't really worry too much about those cracks in the firebox because they're usually going to be fit together. It's not going to be a straight crack shear that can come apart. They're usually jagged and they're locked together, so they're usually not going anywhere. So before you guys, I'm getting you all excited about stuff breaking in the firebox, I just want to say it's going to happen. I think the best thing to do is not worry about it. People are saying, how can I fix it? Can I spray stuff inside there? And, all the things we've talked about. Just accept it. just know that firebox wear is a part of stove use, and it's going to be a regular maintenance issue. And for me, I just choose the one that's the easiest to maintain. I'm lazy. What can I say? So I just like to stick ceramic fiberboard cheeks, as I say, back in there every couple seasons at the price of $10 or whatever it might be. It's a 5-minute job. It's a done deal. I don't worry about it. I do recommend fire brick splits or something like that for people who are building stoves for guests or family. If they're going to be used by a lot of different hands, and you're not going to be sort of putting your wood in gently because you know how to use your stove, but people are going to go back to the old ways, and there's going to be a piece of wood in there, and they're going to take another piece of wood and jam it in there, then, ceramic fiberboard is only going to last a few weeks. So you're definitely going to want to go with fire brick. But those are my feelings on that stuff. So Obadiah asks, what type of temperatures can borosilicate glass handle? So Obadiah, I'm not the materials expert in terms of the differences in the various high temp glasses. I do want to say I think that there's some nomenclature issues. My understanding is borosilicate, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that we use borosilicate glass in our stoves. At least the ones that I use, the glass that I'm comfortable with is ceramic glass. It's known, has a few different brand names. Ceram is one, Robax is another, and they're rated at like 13 to 1400-ish Fahrenheit continuous use. Now, rocket stoves and some of the places we put windows probably see higher temps than that, but they can shed heat. They're usually exposed to the room on the other side, so they probably don't ever see that kind of temperature. You know, they never reach that temperature themselves. Now, borosilicate glass, I think, is kind of more like Pyrex, and I don't think that's appropriate anywhere in a rocket stove, in my opinion. And I could be wrong about that if someone wants to do some, look it up. But I do know that there's Pyrex, there's high temp glass, and then you get into Pyrex, and there's some different categories that go up to like the 1,000-degree range, but none of those have the same kind of temperature swing. What am I looking for? Basically they're just going to shatter. And if you guys have seen the Pyrex ones, they'll shatter really. Borosilicate is rated at 350 degrees Celsius. That's what I thought. It is. It's comparable to Pyrex, like those baking dishes. It has no place in a rocket stove, in my opinion. When they do shatter, they shatter violently. And I learned that the hard way. So I'm not judging anybody. I made my own Pyrex baking dish lids and windows. My first stove, if you go back to my old videos, my first rocket stove has a pie dish for a window, and it worked great for about 3 weeks, and I loved it. And then it shattered explosively and scared my dog, and it was terrifying. So there you go. Neoceram and Robax 800 degrees C and quartz 1,000 degrees C. So great. Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. Lovely to have some research assistance here. So Augustus says, Matt, I heard you say in a YouTube video something about the ceramic glass handling highest temperatures best without contacting hard surfaces. What's the best way to mount it? So Augustus, so the only thing you don't want to do is just pinch it hard so that its size is restricted. Because even though it doesn't move much, it does grow a little bit, especially across like a 28-inch span or whatever the top of a stove is. And then not only that, but if you pinch it tight against bricks, well, they're going to be expanding and contracting too. So you're going to have a time when things expand and contract the wrong way, and all of a sudden, that thing's pinched. So you don't need to do anything fancy. My preference has just been to use the clay sand mortar. So I'll set my bricks so they leave about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch gap all the way around on all sides of that ceramic glass, and then just run a bead of that clay sand mortar in there. Now, if you really want to do a nice expansion joint, you can use ceramic wool or ceramic fiber board to, you can rabbet it out and let the glass top down into that. And then it would just be floating in that ceramic. And then you could dress the edges with mortar or even little tiles. I mean, there's a million things you could do cosmetically to then mate the edge. If that was just a little bit recessed from your top level, you could have tiles coming down. So there's a few ways you could do that. So positive aspect, do you have time today to talk about doors? I've been talking to Max. Just want to know if one will work for your designs. Yes, positive aspect, I do. Great question. So actually, I just got an email from Max last night. He had emailed me when you had emailed him. And I emailed him back my question, which is the same question I think I sent to you regarding... I've had a few questions, so it might not have been you, but someone else asked me about his doors. And here's the deal with doors. For my plans. My plans are designed around my combustion cores. They've been tested rigorously, and a huge part of that testing process was the air settings. They're crucial. They're absolutely mandatory, in my opinion, if you care about efficiency, and I think that's the reason why we build these stoves. So it's mandatory that you are able to achieve those air settings. So I get a lot of questions on doors. People want to use doors from fire, old wood stoves or something they've salvaged or something else they've found on eBay or whatever. And my answer is always the same: is if you can achieve the same air settings, then you can use the door. So my stoves require about 6 inches of air coming in. That's a combination of both primary and secondary, but in my newer designs, those share the same inlet. So the doors that I'm speccing for those have roughly 6-inch cross-sectional area. And unfortunately, most of the doors you'll find out there are usually like a third of that available. And so, positive aspect in this case, unfortunately, all of the doors that I saw from that product line were 2.2-inch cross-sectional area for the air intake. So in my opinion, they're not a good choice for my designs. They look really good. I'm going to try to incorporate some designs in the future that maybe have some different air settings, but that's going to be, a whole different core. And frankly, it's really just about it's the carburetor, right? So I think it's just about the most important piece of the puzzle. That's why I always recommend either building your own or just using the one I spec. And if you do use one off the shelf, you just need to modify it to make sure that you can get that much air into it. So, there are other things you could do. You could leave the door open, but if you're doing that, why do you have a door anyways? And then that also brings the air in all the wrong places. So unfortunately, positive aspect, I think my suggestion to you is to either build a door or go with the piece door if you're going to build to my design, and performance is something that matters to you. So there's that. So Obadiah, why would one need secondary or even tertiary air if you can add enough primary air instead? Well, Obadiah, that's a complicated question, and it really goes back to a question that I was going to get to from emails from Augustus, which is that we're really dealing with, in the batch box type burners, we're really dealing with a 2-stage burner. So the goal of the first stage, the wood in the firebox, is just to off-gas and not try and combust completely. And then the second stage is where we want to deliver all of that wood gas that we off-gassed in the first stage and preheated secondary air so we can get complete combustion. So if you just do primary air, and I'm not going to say you can't do it with primary air, but you end up with a really narrow window of what'll work in terms of how much fuel, which part of the burn is efficient. You're going to almost always have too much air. You're going to have air coming in from all over the place, so you can't really control where it goes and how it is controlled. It's a complex question. I could go deeper and deeper, but to answer your question, you don't really. You're right. You can do it with just primary air. But what you do is you really limit your operating window. You know what I mean? It's only going to be running just right at this real specific time. Whereas when we have primary and secondary air, we can start to slow down the rate, and typically we have it set so that the ratio of air will prioritize the secondary air. And by delivering less air to the firebox, we can smolder the wood in the firebox. Okay? And by smoldering it, we're just giving it just enough combustion to generate wood gas, but not enough oxygen or combustion to burn off that wood gas. So that's why we don't necessarily want to have too much primary air, is because if we can control that delivery of wood gas to our secondary burn chamber and then deliver the right amount of secondary air preheated to burn off just that gas. And in that way, we can get sort of an extended sweet spot, a long stretch of clean, efficient burn. If you guys have been following me for a while, you know that when I run my testo, I've always been looking for that long, flat line. And I think I was the first one to really point that out. And Peter was chasing efficiency. He still is, and he's kicking butt at it. But I've always been kind of chasing just sort of a long, stable, clean burn, because that's really, in the real world, that's what matters to me, because that's what I'm doing. I'm burning all day sometimes. So having that ability to control primary and secondary, or even just having those two different air deliveries, gives your stove a much broader range of operating characteristics. So Positive Aspect says, oh well, back to welding. Yeah, Positive Aspect, I wish, Max is a wonderful guy, and I love their program, and I like his whole deal. I don't know if you know, but I went down there and we worked on stoves together at the beginning of our cook stove kind of deal, and I really like Max a lot. I definitely want to support his doors. Unfortunately, it's just trying to fit something to something else that's already been designed. So we did have some conversations, so we'll see what happens in the future. Maybe we can get some more specific ones coming our way. So okay, so let's go back to I want to touch on Augustus's question real quick. So Augustus sent me that awesome photo of his aluminum series build, and then his question, which we kind of just covered, so I just want to make sure we go back over that. He was talking about, is it important that all the fire happens at close to the same physical location within the stove? If all the wood is on fire, don't spent gases from the wood at the front end up diluting the oxygen that gets to the wood and the flammable wood gases at the back? And Augustus, I think from what I just said, you already know that was my answer, and I'll come back to it, but I think you understand now your question and what the answer is. Is this why the most efficient burns come from almost completely shutting off primary air and having well-positioned preheated secondary? See, we were just talking about that. Is this why a J-tube should perform more poorly with coals pushed down the burn tunnel? Exactly. And he says, as long as there is heat being retained in the core, can this be overcome by turbulence and mixing? And so again, we've covered all those things already a little bit today. So can it be overcome by turbulence and mixing? Those three things in balance. So if the temperature is high enough, sure. Yep, sure. We have less dwell time. We're shorter in the burn tunnel. Our coals are back there. There's not so much distance for things to go, so we'll have less turbulence. But it's hotter, so we don't need as much time or temperature, time or turbulence. So yes, conceptually, again, you can change all these things, and in different ratios, they're going to work in different ways. What we're going for with these core designs is something that can operate at peak efficiency kind of in a broad range of states, as it were, and give you that, not just a window of a flash of looking good, but a good burn throughout. And so you really nailed it, and we talked about it already. What we're trying to do is, in a batch box, we're trying to generate wood gas without much combustion in the firebox, and then we want to do controlled combustion in the secondary burn chamber, which is basically the base of the riser directly after the port. So Augustus, thank you so much for your donations. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So hopefully that answers your question on that, Augustus. So let me go to another question here. So this one is from Tall Shadow. And this is a great one. I love this question, Tall Shadow. So this is a question about the angled floor bricks. And he says, in all the batch boxes I've seen, they have angled floor bricks. And I think I remember them being described as a means to help direct the coals to the center so that they're in line with the port and burn more completely. And then he says you're looking at the Sidewinder, and it can see they don't really do that. And is there a reason that I don't know? Are they necessary? I could fit more wood in there without them, and so on. So great question, Tall Shadow. You guys have probably noticed that none of my designs have those angled floor channels. And this is another instance, another example of the stove design matches the designer's goals. And so those, Pete says, could shutting off primary air be a solution in case of overfueling? Pete, yes, absolutely. That's a big reason, why I've developed my stoves the way they are. As I was doing those air tests back in 2014 when the batch box was just coming on the scene, and I was finding that I was having these we talked about earlier, high mass boxes third fire of the day, all your wood gassing off at once and just black smoke coming out of the chimney because of overfueling. That was the solution, was to be able to shut down the air, primary air. And actually, there's a point at which you don't need much air. So yeah, absolutely. That's the thing, is you're trying to control how fast you're delivering wood gas, and you deliver that wood gas by flashing off the wood. And so if you have less oxygen there, you can control that overfueling state. So absolutely, that's the balance between those things. So back to Tall Shadow's question. Because when refueling your riser list, there's often a couple minutes of overfueling. Yeah, Pete, for sure. You definitely could try changing your air settings and see if that changes it. So you're gonna be dealing with, your tuning issues are gonna be unique to your application because you have such a small stove. I mean, you have the potential to blast heat out the chimney, and just a wide variety of things going on there. So I think your tuning for your pizza oven is going to be pretty specific, and it's awesome to hear you going through that. But yeah, I would absolutely encourage you to start kind of choking out that primary, and seeing what you can do to tune it up so you're not so overfueled. So Rodrigo, welcome. Hola. Oh, you're Brazilian. I don't speak Portuguese. But nice to see you, Rodrigo. Glad you're here. I don't know what the Brazilian rooster is, but I'm glad you're here. So let's go back to the angled bricks on the bottom of batch box. So I was just saying that they are specifically an example of the goal of a designer and how they burn their stove. So this is another example of Peter's goal of loading one load, having it burn and burn down completely, and then be out. So those bricks do exactly what you said, Tall Shadow. They just sort of consolidate the coals into a condensed area so that they can all sort of gather together and the air rushes through them, and they ideally burn off more quickly that way. And so it's an effort to hurry through that coaling stage of burning, because that's typically the dirtiest part of a burn. So by accelerating it, by maximizing the heat of it, you burn it more completely and you burn it more quickly, and that minimizes that dirty phase at the end of a burn. Now that only applies if you're not going to put another piece of wood in there, right? Like, that's the only time that's going to make a difference, because typically what we're going to do is get down to just enough coals to put some more wood in, and we're going to reload. At least me. That's the opposite of what Peter wants to do. So for me, those things, the angled floor is a detriment. It doesn't necessarily make the stove burn dirtier, but it certainly fills up with ash quick, and now I can't put any more wood in it. It's high mass, right where we don't want it. So it's robbing heat from the coals, and in my opinion, making that end of that burn even worse than if it was just an insulated material. That isn't the shape, though. That's just the material. The shape would still be useful. But more than anything, it's what you said. It's just that it makes it such a chore to clean the thing out. I have a perfect little Firebox shovel that goes in there when it's a flat floor, but when it's a V'd floor, it's just a pain. And I'm loading wood on wood on wood, and I'm cleaning my stove regularly. So for me, the V is not valuable. And as a matter of fact, I find it to be a net negative in a stove. Now, like I said, Peter is simply chasing a number on the testo, period. That's it. Burn it once, watch that number, get the best efficiency you can. Not picking on it. It's an awesome goal. He is unbelievably adept at it and very inspiring. But what makes the stove perform well for that goal isn't always the same thing as I want for me to heat my house. So hopefully that answers the question, Tall Shadow, with the angled floor bricks in a batch box. Now, keep in mind, batch box rocket stove refers specifically to Peter's design. So does a batch box have angled floor bricks? Should it have angled floor bricks? I'm going to have to say yes. Mine don't. And I don't care for them. But it's Peter's design. And if you want to be true to it, then they're there, and they're there for a reason. His testo proved it. So there's both sides of that coin. So Obadiah says, seems like the primary air controls the speed of the burn, while secondary controls efficiency. Yes, for the most part, Obadiah, I think that's fairly true. I mean, there's an interplay there, of course. But yeah, you know, the primary is I'm not sure what the analogy is exactly. It's like the fuel pump, and then the secondary is like the carburetor Venturi itself, where the fuel and the air mix. But how fast you pump fuel is going to dictate how much you need there in the secondary. So there's an interplay. But yeah, I think, you know, for sure, wide open primary means burning fast. So I think that did Tall Shadow's question. I'm just kind of skimming, you guys. Some of these emails are kind of long to try and pull all the questions out. But I'm doing my best. So Tall Shadow, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad that makes sense. Again, my views, just, you know, no judgment. No, this is good, this is bad. Just hopefully you see what the value is in the different situations. So Carpenter family, good. I'm glad. That makes me feel great. I'm glad you guys find this valuable. Sometimes I wonder, honestly, if I'm doing much good. So I'm happy that this is helping you guys all move forward. I'm trying to cover it all too. It's a little overwhelming. I apologize. This is Belgian Gulch. Belgian Gulch, I don't know where to start with this. You've given me so much info here. And I'm not sure if it's a question. Okay, so he does have a question. Question was, he was asking about doors and attaching them. How do I attach my angle iron frame to the bricks? How is the piece of the door frame attached to the angle iron? So it's a great question, my friend, and I'll tell you that typically I use masonry screws, and I will drill holes in the bricks and just fasten whatever it is I'm fastening into the bricks. So if we're looking at, like, on that door there, and there's, oh boy, here I go trying to do this again. So this edge right here, you know, you're going to screw into it. Yeah, like that. Going sideways into the ends of those bricks. I'll drill using a right angle drill, and I'll put screws in there. And so the Pisla doors, it depends on which door you buy, but they usually have a right angle frame, and you don't always need my angle iron for a Pisla door. In my designs, I use the angle iron, and there's a door flange usually behind the door to control air and fuel settings. And then the doors themselves usually have their own kind of angle iron frame with holes in it, and you can just drill into the bricks and mount with masonry hardware right there. If that isn't the case, sometimes they have face-mounted stuff, and in that case, I'll do the angle iron. And so angle iron, I'll just, again, drill the angle iron, drill the bricks in the inside faces, and just screw them right in. So I hope that answers your question. I'm getting confused. Belgian Gulch. I'm having to cross-reference your real name with your screen name. So Belgian Gulch, that's how I mount the angle iron. So let me catch up with the chat here, and then we'll go back to the body of your post there, Belgian Gulch, because I do want to share, and I got your photos queued up, so we're going to get into that in just a minute. So Obadiah, what is the best wine to drink with your girlfriend in front of the fireplace? Man, I wish I was better with the quick response. I don't have an answer to that, Obadiah. I have no idea. I don't drink wine anymore, and I'm a hermit, man. I haven't seen a woman for years. They never show up out of the woods here, so I couldn't tell you. I keep hoping one of them's going to run out of the forest back there, but I'd probably have to leave my house for there to be women in front of the fire. So, okay, Ryan, nice to see you. Thanks for being here, man. I'm super stoked to have all you guys here, and it is a really cool thing to have all you guys here. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Me sitting there doing those videos is one thing, but talking to you guys is awesome. So, Belgian Gulch, what size screws? Great question. I think I don't. It's off the top of my head. I want to say that the ones I got are like, I think they're like 5/32. I mean, and like 2.5 inch. They kind of, they're masonry screws, and so they have a pretty pronounced thread on them. But it doesn't need to be a giant lag. They kind of just look like deck screws, to be honest, but they're the masonry version of a deck screw. And the deal is if you were putting them in this way and pulling on them this way, they don't have a whole lot of holding power. But the main way that I mount them is 90 degrees perpendicular to the to the forces that are being put on them, right? Because typically the door is mounted like this. We're going to close it open like this, and our screws go this way. So the screws don't really need to be super stout. They don't need to be big lag bolts. So they're typically deck screw-ish size, 2 to 3 inches long. Your standard, 1/8 to 1/4 inch in diameter. Tapcon is a trade name for the screws. That's right, Doug. Exactly. So that's something that we always used to hear on masonry jobs. Go get some Tapcons, and that's a great input. So yeah, just get anything made for masonry. There's a variety of masonry fixtures. Once you kind of open your eyes to it, obviously you go out in the world and you see light fixtures hanging on brick buildings and things like that. So there's a whole host of mounting solutions, but it doesn't need to be really all that complicated. So, you guys, let's go into, we got a question from Marthale7. I'm not trying to say your name. I don't know if you're a Martha or a Mart, or it doesn't matter. But nice to see you. Thank you for being here. And have I ever seen a Venturi with a fan used on the exhaust on a J-tube with ceramic fiber? Interesting question. I haven't seen it used on a ceramic fiber J-tube, but I have seen Venturi fan exhausts used to drive draft in situations where people didn't have it, in places where it wasn't possible to make a bypass, in places where they didn't want a priming, startup at the end of the run, and in places where specifically passive installations weren't a priority. So for most of us rocket stove folks, we want heat when the power goes out. A lot of times those Venturi fan operation setups, people will use them to create draft so they can start their stove in uncomfortable conditions. And what I always say to that is that's a great solution. But if you need to start your stove when there's no power, it doesn't help you much. And so that's the only caveat. It isn't really a big deal to most people. But yeah, they work really well, those Venturi exhausts. So, Mart Hale, that's what I thought, Mart. Yeah. So Mart, so hope that answers your question. Venturi fan draft inducers, they do work very well. They certainly would work with a 7-inch, 6-inch ceramic fiber J. They would help you get that stove started if it was a big build. If you have power available, I don't see any reason why not. So, it'll work, Mart. It'll work, for sure. So, let's see. Okay, so we're going to go back to Belgian Gulch. Yeah, they exist. You can just buy them for draft inducer. Type that in. That'll get you. There's a few different kinds. Venturi is one version. But there's a few different types of draft inducers. So, going to Belgian Gulch's stove. So, Belgian Gulch emailed me a while ago. We talked about this. I think we touched on it briefly. And he and Tall Shadow have been collaborating. I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Belgian Gulch. I'm just going to kind of give you the details of this build, or the overview. They've been collaborating on this build, and he did a really cool thing in that he joined the firebox of his batch box with basically a 5-minute riser stuck all the way down to mate with the port. And where that riser meets the batch box, he just used the ceramic wool, the ceramic blanket, to form the inside of the port and kind of seal that burn chamber. Let's say it's the port, really, but to seal that port from Firebox to into the riser. So it's a really inexpensive, easy way. You could build a brick firebox. You can put your 8-inch stovepipe right at the back end of it, and then you can just put your ceramic wool inside there, make your 5-minute riser, and wrap that port joint, and it's a done deal. So he's calling it the 6-minute riser, and it's really, really, really a cool deal. It reminds me a lot of the cage ceramic wool stoves I was talking about earlier, and it's such a neat solution, and I'm really, really pleased to see you guys embracing these materials. It's taken us a little while to get over the hump and get people to understand that these ceramic fibers are they do make these builds, they make things possible, never been possible before, and so easy, and they such high performance. So I'm really, really happy to hear that it's working. So he burned it, I think, yesterday, and it sounds like it's working great. So I'm super excited about that. Let me catch up with the chat, and then we'll look at some photos. Yeah, Walter is talking about masonry drill bits that don't require a hammer drill. Yep, you can get special bits, and sometimes you get them in a kit. You can just buy the screws. They'll have a bit right in there. And Tall Shadow's talking about Lady of the Lake or Woman of the Woods. That's funny, Tall Shadow. So right, like 2 miles that way from me is Lake Crescent, and Lake Crescent has a famous myth of a Lady of the Lake, because it's a really deep, really cold lake, and it tends to, when people die in there, it soapifies them. And so back in like the 20s, there's a really windy road around it, and back in the 20s or 30s, a car went off the road and a woman was lost, and then I don't remember if it was months or years later, but her body would occasionally be seen sort of drifting. She was soapified, and she would bob and appear in various places around the lake, so known as the Lady of the Lake. Keep the fire burning. So anyways, let's go to the photos, shall we? Let's dive right into here, and we'll get some other photos along the way, so we'll talk about them all as they come up. So here's Augustus's cool build again. Love that, Augustus, very neat. And Belgian Gulch says 2 burns today. Second burn got the stack temp up to 132. I'm glad to hear that, Belgian Gulch. I think that your original stack temp was a little bit... I think it could be problematic at that cold. Hopefully your average temps will be a little warmer than that. I mean, that's great efficiency, but you may end up with some issues if it stays that cold. I think that once your bell is warm, it'll be a whole different story. I bet you'll run at 220 or so. It sounds like it's going to be ideal, to be honest. I mean, this is what you want, is you want those stack temps to be right about there at this time of the year when you're burning like this. So I think it's great. So here we're looking at, actually, just on our way to Belgian Gulches, here we're looking at David Swanson's cool build in his fireplace. You can see this. And David, I don't know if you're still here. I apologize. I didn't get to this a little bit ago when you commented. But this is David's really cool build. He's got a riserless core here. You can see he's just got a real simple metal frame around it, and he put glass here where the end of the burn combustion chamber is, so he can watch that burn. And then he's got this radiator, and you can see he's got a shroud around it, and he uses a fan to blow the air all around this radiating box and heat out into the room. So that's a pretty neat way to use a riserless core in a different type of space. Now, there's a lot of ways you could go from here. You could go over to the side and build a brick bell in the side there and extract even more heat. But for just a simple, something to play with, temporary, no permanent thing, doesn't mess up his house, this is a cool way to do that. I don't know if he does, Mart. We'd have to ask him. He was here a few moments ago. Perhaps he's still around. I have a few more photos I'll try and share, but they don't show much more than that. So let's see, I'm at the end of the rope there. I'm going to go back through these, and there's one more picture of his build. So cool, isn't it? And I think that's his blower fan, right? I think this is blowing in, and then it's going to come out here outside the shroud. So pretty neat way to go. So okay, moving on. So these pictures are all disorganized. So here is a picture of Belgian Gulch's Firebox and riser coming together in this 6-minute riser configuration. So you can see he's got the ceramic wool there, kind of wrapped around to make a mating surface, to make a gasket, as it were, where this riser is going to meet, and he's going to push those two together, and then just make sure that there's you could, if you were coming from the inside of that riser, you could wrap your cloth from inside the riser out around that port. Very, very cool, simple build. And then once this is all done, you could, if this was all in a box, you could pack all this with cob if you wanted to, and stabilize it. I don't know what you ended up doing there, Belgian Gulch. If you don't really need to, but you could, definitely make this sort of a monolithic build, encapsulating all this construction inside of some cob and bricks, and it would be way cool, real stable. And if the metal ever went away, it wouldn't matter. I don't think it's going to. It's not going to get hot enough on the external side. So very cool. So Robin asks, what are the parameters for good stack temperature? Robin, it's a broad question. It really depends on, again, so many variables. What's going on outside, what's your temperatures inside, what are you burning, what are you doing? But as a general rule of thumb, once things are up and running and you're long-term stable, if you have a real efficient heater, you're going to be somewhere in the low 200s, hopefully, up to the low 300s. Much higher than that, and you're probably sending a little bit of extra heat out the chimney that you don't need to. Much less than that, and you're going to start to have finicky performance. The stove just isn't going to be drawing hard enough in all conditions to overcome certain issues. So again, stack temp is really a function of a lot of variables. How tall is the stack? What's the difference in temperature between the inside and outside? A lot of variables. But as a general rule of thumb, between 200 and 300, you're doing great. Somewhere close to 300, a little bit above, you're still doing fine, but much higher than that, and you're wasting some heat. And it'll change. In the midwinter, when it's really cold outside and I'm burning really hot, my chimney temps could be like 400 degrees. I'm going to be wasting some heat, and that's just the nature of that exaggerated draft and me trying to blast the stove super hot and all of those things. So, sometimes you don't need that much heat, so your stack temps just aren't going to be that hot because you're not burning that hot. So there you go. So David, there you are. So David says the glass at the end of the burn chamber gets a little soot when adding new wood to a hot stove, but then clears as the burn progresses. Way cool, man. Way cool. So Pete says I tried the second window as well. Unfortunately, the glass got foggy after a couple of burns as a result of fly ash burning in the glass. Yeah. And so that happens. You guys know my first Walker full cook stove had that glass at the corner. Love it. Very cool to see. It does. It gets scoured pretty quickly. Eventually that fly ash almost like etches it or something and leaves it sort of like etched looking. And I don't know if there's any solution to that. It's still pretty cool to get some light and heat out of there. I will say I think you're compromising a little bit of efficiency, but you're gaining heat into the room, light, viewing. I think it's a great trade-off. I'm not picking on it at all. I think it's really cool, and someday I'm going to build one like that. So, and the glass at the end of the burn chamber shows only a little ash at the bottom of the glass after winter season burn. Yeah, that's one of the neat things about the stove is it doesn't send a whole lot of ash downstream. I think a big part of that is that right angle turn at the beginning. It tends to drop a lot of the ash early in the combustion path, and it's a really clean burning stove, the riserless core. So I'm really happy to hear that. I'm still showing you guys this photo. I'm sorry, you guys. I'll switch back to my face, but let's go through some of these photos and just take a look at the rest of these real quick. So this is inside Belgian Gulch's batch box. That's the top of his 5-minute riser. We were just looking at the bottom there, and there's the top. And he's got a double barrel stack here. So this barrel and then another one on top. There he is burning, I think. It's hard to see in that photo. But here's the whole build. And this is a really cool photo. So you can see he's got a double barrel stack there. And then a brick bell. And then his exhaust chimney. and way cool build. Belgian Gulch, love it. Love the simplicity. Love how much mass you got into that thing. This is one thing I love about building with bricks is it's a pretty condensed format, but that thing weighs a lot. When I say it weighs a ton, it literally weighs probably a ton and change. So really neat, small footprint, large thermal mass, plus a giant radiator, right? So he's going to heat his shop up lightning fast with this thing. So Belgian Gulch, you said you had a fire, 2 burns today. Second burn got stack temp up to 132. So that means his bricks were, probably just starting to barely feel warm to the outside, I'm guessing. Once you get to where these bricks are warm to the touch and, plus 100 degrees, like 100, sometimes I get mine in the 200 degree range, but when you're up to 130, 140, 150 degrees on these bricks, I think you're going to be seeing 200 degrees in the stack, and I think that's going to be awesome. I think this thing's going to be a champ, Belgian Gulch. It looks great. So, really cool. Now, I think you did, you told me you elevated the Firebox as well, just to get it off the floor. So underneath the Firebox down here, I'm guessing you just have a solid plinth for this thing to stand on, perhaps. Or maybe it's more bell space, I'm not sure. Anyways, very cool. Just love it, man. Such a neat build. So there's your stack temps. And I think that brings us all the way around to the end there. Yeah. So, all right, I'm back. So, yeah, I bet you love it, Belgian Gulch. Great job, my friend. Really, really, really cool, man. That is one heck of a build, in my opinion. And to be honest with you, if I, find myself with a need for heat in my shop, I maybe do a mimic of that. So, one of the things I love about the original rocket stove is that combination of quick heat from the radiator and slow heat from the mass. Now, in my current situation, I live in a tiny shack. I don't need much quick heat. I get overheated. I need more mass, so the glass top is just enough. But that's a really cool combination of those elements that you put together there, Belgian Gulch. Very neat. So, and Augustus asks, Belgian Gulch, do you think the ratio of metal to brick is right? And do you find it heats the room too much to heat before you heat the bricks much? And so that's awesome, Augustus. You and I, great minds think alike, and so do ours. I think that in a cold workshop in Montana where you're going to want to show up and heat that place up quick, but you're not sleeping there, I would be inclined to prioritize more metal with some mass so that you can always drive more heat into the space quickly with your burn, and then you just get a little bit of a flywheel effect to sort of stabilize the swings in there. But a big radiating surface in a shop is pretty useful. And as Belgian Gulch is saying right there, an uninsulated shop, so you want the quick room heat. And I think that's exactly what I would do in that situation too, Belgian Gulch. It's a really good mix of those things, and I think you've done a nice job balancing them. And the one thing you've done that I really approve of, and that I encourage all rocket stove builders to do, is you've kind of designed it big. In some ways you've oversized it, and I think that's a lot of people want to heat big spaces with these small stoves, and I'm always like, no, heat a small space with a big stove. You'll be much happier. If you have a big space, put in a few stoves. But I definitely think that what you've done there is you'll be able to keep the chill off for sure. So really cool to see, man. Can't wait to see it. To see it once we get a little colder and you can really lay into it. But in the meantime, thank you for all of that, for sharing all of those techniques, and you guys, everyone out there, pay attention to what he and Tall Shadow, I think they worked on it together. I want to give everyone credit, but pay attention to that 6-minute riser, he's calling it. So you guys understand the 5-minute riser is stovepipe filled with ceramic fiber. not filled with, lined with ceramic fiber. And what Belgian Gulch did that's different is he slit the pipe down at the bottom where the port is and basically makes the port in the pipe as well, and then butts that to the firebox and seals that gap with the ceramic wool, lines that port with ceramic wool to join those two components. So it's a really cool thing. It eliminates a whole lot of finicky business that goes on down there, and I think it's going to perform really well. So nice work, you guys, and thank you for sharing that with all of us. Much appreciated. Really, 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 really pleased to be able to be a part of that here. So Doug says, Matt, I have a 7-inch chimney in my house. I want to build a batch heater. Is there any reason to build a smaller heater, like a 6-inch versus a 7-inch? Doug, not unless you want a smaller heater. So you can run, I think in that stove we were just looking at, in Belgian Gulch's stove, he has an 8-inch chimney and a 7-inch front end. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it that way. As a matter of fact, I think you get great performance with an oversized chimney. I don't think there's any reason to do it, though, unless, you know, the physical footprint of the smaller stove is to your preference, and it will heat your space. If that's the case, then just go with a 6-inch stove and run it in your 7-inch chimney, no problem. But if you have a 7-inch chimney and you have a space that could use that much heat, I definitely would encourage you to build a 7-inch heater if possible. They do grow quite a bit in terms of footprint. You'll be surprised how much bigger a 7-inch core is than a 6-inch core. I think an 8-inch core is twice as big again than a 50% larger. Well, geez, I'm not doing very good. I never took statistics. So, anyways, it's a lot bigger. So almost twice as big in terms of the CSA throughout than a 6-inch to an 8-inch, and so a 7-inch somewhere in between there. Just know that it's going to be larger. Augustus, did you? He did send me photos. I thought I just showed them. Was there something that you were wanting to see that we weren't seeing? Augustus asks, Belgian Gulch, can you send some photos of the 6-minute riser to share with us? Using a 5-minute riser and a gasket of blanket, but it doesn't interlock at all. So, Augustus, let me know what you're looking for. I did just show those photos that he sent, and that shows the. We saw the top of the riser, and we saw the bottom of the riser, where they fit together. So, and David says, my 8-inch riser list uses a 6-inch flue. Yeah, so that is another interesting approach, David. I wouldn't recommend that, but for you, it seems to be working great. So far, so good. So Always Learning says, have you seen an hourglass reduction to create turbulence? Well, Always Learning, that is essentially what the port is in both my riserless core and in Peter's Batchbox core. They essentially are, if you were to look at the broad shapes, you have kind of two big bodies of a firebox and a combustion chamber, and a small narrow waist, a thorax of an hourglass reduction at the port. So it essentially is that hourglass chamber. We don't want to smooth those corners out to make it a real hourglass, because you will get the boundary layer will stick the gases to those smooth surfaces, and you'll get a ton of surface tension, and you won't get the same turbulence you get from having sharp edges making that hourglass shape, because then we get rotors and mixing. So hopefully that helps. Well, Augustus, I can certainly bring those photos right back up again real quick. Belgian Gulch answers you there and says he's going to have a lot more photos on the boards. But let me go back real quick. We'll just take a quick look at those, and I'll see if you can see what... So there's yours, Augustus. So you have this nice thick blanket inside your 8-inch core. I think it looks great. I don't see any issue there. Oh, I know what you're referring to. You're referring to the interlock between the core and the riser. So let's talk about that real quick. So what I was talking about happens when you put the riser behind the core of a batch box. So it won't work the same with a J because a J doesn't have a port. So while you could do it with a J, I still think this is the best way to go, just setting the riserless riser on top of the completed J. Because that square lip at the back of the burn chamber is important for turbulence. So I don't think you'd want to change it. But I think what you're referring to with regards to the interlock, Augustus, is this area here. So this is his 5-minute riser here, and this is his burn chamber. So where yours was set on top here, this is a batch box, so it has this port. He's just cut a slit here in the flue and then just butted these together. And I see you saying you get it now. So that's all there is to that. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can see why it isn't quite the same with a J. So yeah, your J is just going to set on top, but with a batch you actually have this little tiny port that allows you to interface that with the flue pipe. So yeah, it saves a ton of work. It's really cool. It's really neat, and I mean, look at what you guys have done. So what do we need now to build a batch box core? We basically just need enough fire bricks to build the firebox, which is a real basic task, and then that riser, and from there you're up and running. That's amazing. I mean, these are cores that, you know, we usually spend hundreds of dollars on, and here's one that, I mean, fire bricks can be expensive, but I don't know, that's really cool. So Pete asks, any thoughts on galvanized steel and the release of toxins when heated, and from what temp could that be an issue? Yeah, Pete, you can look up welder's flu or welding fever, I think, if I remember correctly. There's a few different terms for it, and you can get very, very specific information on that. Years ago, I looked it all up when I was concerned about that stuff. It's worth being concerned about. It's not going to, you know, put it this way. Galvanized, if I remember correctly, you can look it up. It'll come up in a second. I want to say it's like 750 degrees Fahrenheit is the point at which you start to, and I'm going to just say some words, and they're probably scientifically wrong, but is the point at which you start to off-gas that zinc, whatever it is, zinc oxide, whatever it is you make, sulfur, zinc, something. I can't remember what it is, but it's something bad. It converts, whether it's just oxidizing it or gassing or converting, and it does bad stuff to you, and it can kill you. And it happens about 750 degrees, so you don't want to put galvi anywhere where that's going to happen. Now, that said, you know, things like galvanized flue pipe, you're probably never going to see that 750 degrees. I mean, hopefully in a rocket mass heater, you just couldn't even do it. Zinc, yeah, I just didn't know if it was straight zinc or what it was, David. I'm not sure. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's bad. So with flue pipe, I used to burn a lot of that off in a big bonfire, and then I would use it. It's mostly a danger, from what I understand, if you're, you know, breathing it like you're welding over it, and you're getting some direct gases. It's only going to happen once with each piece of metal, if you know. Hopefully, if you get it to temp and burn it off. I'm not trying to discredit it. I think galvanized just basically doesn't have any place in stove building, but sometimes we end up using it. You saw my boiler. I had a galvanized chimney on there just because it's what I had. You know, I salvaged it from some HVAC use. So there you go. 750 degrees is my understanding. So hope that helps, and in terms of the toxins, it is toxic. I'd try and avoid it. I wouldn't worry that you're going to kill yourself just like having a fire to burn off a piece of metal for your own use. Stand away from it, you know, burn it off outside. You're fine, but it's not something you wanna you know, have happening all the time. So Ryan says batch box construction and implementation is new to me. Just what you guys were talking about with joining them together. Only really familiar with the old J-tube style. And I'd like to implement a batch box and bell my old fireplace is. Main concern is supporting the weight from in the crawl space. Awesome, Ryan. So a couple things, information for you for batch box. I would encourage you to look up Peter Vandenberg's site. Is it rocketstoves.eu? Does someone know? I can't remember, and I don't want to look it up right now. But if you type in Peter Vandenberg, those are 3 words, Vandenberg, or batch. I think it's rocketstoves.eu or batchrocket.eu. At any rate, you can't search for very long until you'll find his website, and he has free given away all of his plans for his batch box design made with fire bricks. You can find the front of the Firebox design, then you could use Belgian Gulch's 6-minute riser for that second stage of it. Peter is sometimes on Permies. He's more often, I think, on Donkey's board. I'm not on Permies very often, so I'm not sure how often he's there. But he's fairly active, and I definitely would recommend, just to get yourself up to speed with the batch box, since you're familiar with the J's, he's really the source for all things batch box. I have my own design, my riserless core, but I'm, also basically just sort of facilitating his amazing design as best I can. So, batchrocket.eu. That's it. I thought so, Pete. Thank you. Okay, so David has some great personal experience as a warning to all of us. So I welded galvanized without adequate ventilation. Right lower lung lobe collapsed. So we can all learn from that we do not want to be messing with Galvi and not welding on it at all. Please. So there's that. Thanks for sharing that, David. That's good information. So there we go. So what do you guys think? We've been going for about an hour and 20. Probably enough for today. We covered a lot of great stuff, you guys. Yeah, you bet, Ryan. No problem, man. I appreciate you being here. That's what I want to be here for. I mean, I'm really happy to have this this venue to be able to sit and share with you guys like this. Because like I said, I just keep racking my brain for ways to share this information in videos, but there's nothing like this two-way interaction. So really appreciate you guys being here. Yeah, thank you guys. I'm just going to say it again. Every time you say thank me, thank you. So yeah, Mart, Augustus, David, Ryan, Pete, my friends Belgian Gulch and Tall Shadow, Carpenter family, positive aspect, always learning. I'm not looking, I'm just trying to go from memory, but really appreciate all you guys. And I love to share this stuff with you, and I love being, feeling like I'm valuable. So it means a lot to me, you guys. So keep coming. And, I want to say thank you, a big heartfelt thanks to those of you, Permies regulars who are supporting my work there, and also letting those folks know that I'm here as a resource, because that's it's hard for me to be everywhere, but one of the biggest things I want to do is have people who want to build stoves come here and be able to talk about them for real, because as you guys know, I think my people here who are helping on Permies have done an awesome job of really showing people a good good path forward with their builds. But boy, the information is all over the place, and to just sit and have some reasonable talk amongst a group really, I think, helps us kind of solidify our thoughts and work towards, really enabling people to build these things and enabling people to live better lives and have cleaner burns and be better for everybody. So really appreciate it, all you guys. Doug, thank you very much. And I think that's enough for today. I'm going to hit the outro video and just tell you guys thank you so much once again. I'll be here next week. And tell everyone, if you know anyone who's building a stove, let them know. Come hang out with us. So really appreciate all you guys. Here's the video. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot, you guys.